Welcome to Coachify, a podcast where we have moving conversations for expats with a coaching mindset on everyday topics. We bring helpful concepts closer to you so you can use them in your everyday life. I am Réka, life coach working with expats, focusing on change management and resilience. You can connect with me via Instagram, Facebook, or my website, The Enchanted You. You will find more information about me, my guest, and about our topic in the episode notes. Today, my guest is Dasha again, who is a leadership coach. We had a discussion about leading and new leaders in a previous episode. And today we will talk about multicultural workplaces. Welcome back, Dasha. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. You have a very soothing voice.
Thank you.
Like, I love it. It's like, da, 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 da. I'm like, okay, this is Friday. And it's like, I am totally loving it.
I
Thanks for
love it.
having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back to the podcast. I was really excited for this discussion again. In our previous discussion, we mostly focused on leaders, new leaders, and leadership. But there is another important aspect of expat work life, which we need to address, which we need to focus on working and leading in a multicultural and multilingual workplace. How was your first experience when you joined a company like this?
So actually, my first experience in multicultural and multilingual environment was in the business school I attended. It was in Nantes, France.
Mhm.
And it was an amazing and exciting experience. And honestly, I think at that point, when I started getting exposure to different cultures, my brain, my brain didn't register everything because it was a lot, right? I am raised and born in Ukraine. So I never had any encounters with so many different cultures. And it was such an amazing experience. And I remember vividly what was my big surprise. There was a big Indian community in the school, and we had a canteen. So in canteen, you can buy something there, or you can bring your food. And so they invited me over lunch, and I'm coming to the lunch with, I don't remember what I had, some, lunch box with some food. And so there were like 8 to 10 people. They're sitting at the table. They're putting the lunch boxes in the middle. They're opening everything and they're sharing. And you see, this is the first thing because Indian is a collectivistic culture. So there is a culture of share. Ukrainians are a little bit more individualistic. So that was my first, like, we don't do it in my country. So that was my first encounter. And then obviously many more, right? About cultures, directness, and stuff like that. But it was amazing. First, I think I didn't get it. First, I was a little bit scary and I didn't understand it,
Mhm.
right? Because I was 22 and I was like, no, but we don't do it like this.
Mhm.
So it's like, why do you do it like this? So my brain was like, if that's not the way I used to do, that's the wrong way.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was super, super glad and lucky that I was exposed to global culture at such a young age. I still consider it young age because my brain started changing.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing the experience. I just see it in front of my eyes how everyone sits around the table sharing food. That's so cool.
And I'm like, but this is my food.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Uh-huh.
it's like, okay. So it was really, really cool.
Yeah, the food culture, like the food part of our cultures are so important, such a big like area of our cultures that we cannot really um turn it off. And
It's
it
like a
can.
heritage.
Yes, yes, we can share with that a big piece of ourselves, I think, when we share our food culture. Yeah. It was interesting when
Absolutely.
you brought in that your first experience, it was a lot and you were exposed to so many different cultures. And I remember the first time I went abroad with a scholarship during university. I visited different countries before during high school because I was studying tourism. But during university, I got a scholarship and I spent half a year, like one semester in the northern Czech Republic. And that was my first shocking experience, but this was an amazing experience for me
What
because
was the biggest shock?
that, well, I didn't speak the language at all. Like, I remember sitting on the train, and that was my first time going alone for a longer period of time somewhere. Like, I had like summer jobs, where I was alone, in a different city. But this was the first time I went somewhere where I didn't know anyone. I only knew that the name of the person who will wait me at the final station, but I needed to change trains on the way. I didn't speak Czech at all at that time. And I remember um, sitting on a train trying to read through these, tourist dictionaries and trying to memorize at least how to say hi, how to greet people, how to ask for a ticket in the next station. I mean, I had my ticket, but I was so worried that I will need public transport or something. And I remember how tired I was after the first days. My brain was just so tired of constantly adjusting to hearing another
Yes.
language which I didn't know and speaking English. Like, I spoke English fairly well, but I think when you have this experience in a multicultural place or like abroad, and you are bound to use the language, that turns a switch somewhere in you, and that's when you can become fluent, basically, when you need to rely on your foreign language knowledge. So that's what happened to me. So I was so tired of speaking English all the time, searching for words, searching for phrases, getting the courage to actually talk to people, and
It's
then
a lot.
trying to decipher another language which I did not know at that time, Czech. That was so tiring.
It is, it is. It's like, you are facing the change each and every second,
Hmm.
right? And as the resilience coach, that change is like we need to constantly adapt, adjust, and it takes us much more energy because we used
Yes.
to like work on automatic,
Hmm. Robot pilot.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Autopilot.
Yeah. Fun fact, as I've heard you talking, fun fact about my mom, which I was, amazed by her and embarrassed by her, because she actually came to visit me to France. And you know what? I was shy to speak French because I was just learning French. She didn't speak a word of English or French. She had no problems talking to people on the street, asking directions. She's like, Zara, Zara. And people were talking to her and they were explaining. And she was even speaking, like, her language, like she speaks Russian. Uh, and people were trying to understand, so it's all in our heads, and I was like, oh no, no, I will not pronounce this word perfectly, so I would rather not try. So my mindset was a fixed mindset. Her mindset was a growth mindset, because she was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go and try. I'm gonna be okay, right? And that worked.
Yeah, her will of communication, like she wanted to connect to people, was much stronger than her self-consciousness.
She wanted to go to Zara, much stronger than anything else, and then she was like, Zara, Zara. And that was amazing, honestly.
That's so cool. And this the same thing happens to me whenever I go to Germany or Austria or any German speaking area. So I speak German to a certain extent. My mom is a teacher and a coach and a trainer and many more. But I learned German when I was a kid growing up. So I basically acquired the language. I didn't really learn it in school, but I don't use it often. So anytime I go to Germany, I basically need to reach for my knowledge from the back of my head, like somewhere there's a knowledge. And at first I feel the same tiredness in the first few days, and then my brain gets used to it, and then I can use it again.
I can totally appreciate it. I can definitely appreciate it because it's the courage, right? And the energy to face the unknown and to actually switch
Yes.
and change from autopilot to like, okay, so now what I do now, what word do I use and stuff like that. I can totally appreciate it. And honestly, I've been learning English since 8. And I went to France to that business school when I was 22. I thought, Réka, I have it. I thought like my English is really, really good. Ooh, oh my God. Google Translate was like, I didn't get, like, I think every fifth word I didn't understand.
The
right?
accent.
Because people who are speaking fluently, I'm like, and in schools, we were learning business English. What I faced was a day-to-day English, right? About food, about some utensils, about stuff like that. And I realized that I don't know those words. And I'm like, okay, Google, 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 Google. And I was in panic and I was shocked, so it takes a lot of efforts and courage, definitely, and a lot of patience.
Yes. And your experience was from business English to everyday English. But
Yeah.
oftentimes when we move abroad or when expats experience this the first time, it's the other way around. They might know everyday English, and nowadays we consume so much content online, YouTube and podcast and books and whatever and movies, that we are more familiar with the everyday language, but we might not be familiar with the business terms or like all these acronyms. So our English changes to more of this global English, and we are missing the business terms. So when someone moves abroad for work, that's basically the reverse shock of it. So you need to learn all the acronyms, KPIs, whatever, especially in the big corporate world. Um, how was your experience with that? Did you have this reverse shock when
Oh,
you
for
did that?
sure. 100%. When I started working at my international corporation at Serva, I started as the international move coordinator. And there were so many words I didn't know, right? Like freight and like specific words, like logistics related words. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? What is that? And I was still, this perfectionist good girl. And I was like, no, I will not ask because they will think I'm stupid. So, like, I will Google it because I want to look smart. But then what I realized over years, it is so okay to ask. Oh my God, it's like it is so normal. Especially people can totally appreciate English is not your first language, right? When it comes to acronyms, I teach my guys. I say, guys, please don't use those acronyms because the other department they don't need to know those acronyms, right? So just help them. Imagine that you're talking to a 3 or 5 year old kid. Make it as simple as that. Don't try to pretend you're a smart cookie. Don't try to complicate stuff because sometimes I see people are talking really complex and long sentences and it's really, really hard to comprehend. My style is like make it easy. Use as easy, like simple, short sentences. Um, Easy words, right? For people. Sometimes I switch off. I can use something like professional because I'm in it for years now. But we always need to adjust to the person whom we are talking to, right? If it's a
Yeah.
student, if it's a new hire, we need to simplify our language because can you imagine people are frustrated or excited and nervous and it's like, it's a lot of emotion. So our task is to make it as easy for them as possible and also promote this culture of making mistakes. It's okay to ask. You don't have to be perfect, right? Of course, we want you to learn and to have this knowledge to my granny loves to tell absorb it as you are what like the sponge, absorb the knowledge as you're the sponge. So of course we want people to absorb and retain knowledge, but it's okay to ask at all times,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't mean that they should be asking the same question for 15 times. That's what I'm saying. But in the meantime, it's fine. We are at different of different origins, different knowledge backgrounds, different everything. Right? The biggest mistake is to think that everyone should be like you or like your culture or like your style and so on and so forth. That's the biggest mistake.
I think it sometimes comes from that, but I also think sometimes it's just the bias of knowledge. To, as you said, you are in it for years, and I noticed this with myself when I was in a leadership position and I was teaching new joiners, which is one of my favorite things to do, onboarding new people. But I noticed that I was in the company for many years, and I was in the profession for so many years. I didn't even notice that I used professional words or like phrases which were not as a first timer were not really understandable. And I needed to remind myself that when I joined that corporate, the same corporate, I had a page in my notebook just for acronyms. I wrote a table because I had no idea what was it. And I needed to know them. And as time goes, we get so used to it that we need to remind ourselves that the person who we are teaching or training or just working with, maybe that's their first time at a corporate like this, or maybe that's their first time abroad, and not just take it as obvious.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I was actually quite the opposite when I started teaching and onboarding new hires. I was like, okay, let's be really like, let me repeat stuff for several times so that I am sure that, it landed. And they appreciated it because it's new information and that's a lot. But my friends and family, they hated me because I took it from my corporate life into my personal life. And I was, without actually realizing it, I was repeating stuff for 5 times. And my mom was like, do you think I'm stupid? You just said that. And I'm like, Mom, I'm really, really sorry because it's like, it's what I call my professional fault. Right? Because it's like my brain adjusts to repeating and being simple and being like this a little bit mama style. Oh, yeah, this is that. Okay, let me repeat once again. And my friends is like, just stop it. It's like, don't babysit us. It's like, I'm not babysitting you, right? I'm just, I need to switch.
Yes, and this repeating thing is not just for people who are new, but for people who are different in terms of culture or language. So oftentimes, maybe we both speak English, but because of our maternal tongue, because of our native language, we connotate a different feeling or slightly different meaning to the same English word. Because let's be honest, no one like learns the dictionary. So when you say something, it can have a slightly different meaning connected to the English word in another language.
True.
So when
True, for
we
sure.
meet with someone who is from a completely like far away culture, meaning not just distance, but like in a cultural term, it it's important to clear what you mean by that and what
Yes,
you
for
what you
sure.
refer to. Yeah, right? And
Don't
how
assume.
you handle things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is so, so important. It's like because it is easy to create a conflict based on wrong assumption, right? So what we need to do, we need to clarify and check the meaning, as you said, and make sure that we are absolutely on one page. And I'll give you an example. So for example, in my language, there is much softer version of the word request. Because and in English there are not many alternatives to the word request, because usually in my language when we say request is like I command you. Réka, I request is like I command you do this, right? So it's very like really strict form of the verb. But so sometimes when I say I request, I need to make sure that I am softening this request with may I kindly ask you, or may I please request, or I have you know um a quick request, if I may. So I'm trying to soften that by the other verbiage that I'm using in the same sentence.
I love that you brought this word specifically because it reminded me of an experience I had back in Hungary when I still worked in HR and recruitment, and we were welcoming people who were Hungarian speakers but from abroad, from Serbia, from Romania, from Slovakia, not that much, but Serbia a lot of times. And their way of saying things oftentimes differed from how I would say things. And we both spoke Hungarian. So
Yes.
how I would ask someone, could you please do this? Or would it be possible to do this? Or I would like this to happen. And they said, it should be done like this. And they meant the same thing. For them, it was the way of requesting something. But
Yes.
for me, it felt extremely rude, like they're ordering me,
Yes.
or it should have been already done. And it took me some time to get used to it, obviously, since I was in a professional position and I was there HR connection, I couldn't address it directly, but I needed to, get used to it and understand that they did not mean anything bad, anything rude. This is their way of saying the same thing in the same language,
Yeah.
but from a
In the
different
same
cultural
language, same,
background.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Can you imagine like how much it multiplies in the global world?
Yes.
It's crazy.
It's
It's
amazing.
absolutely crazy.
It's
And it's like, I think the learning experience that we need to draw from this is don't take things personally, right? And don't assume, because sometimes indeed it's the cultural difference, because some cultures are more direct, some cultures are in between the lines.
Yes.
Right? So those direct cultures might be perceived as rude by the indirect cultures. So I don't like it, Réka, right? I stated a simple thing. I was not rude. I don't like it. But for some cultures, it might be perceived as rude, because what they would say, oh, yes, it actually is very good, but there might be something that, might potentially be improved, whereas I don't like it. And it's really, really huge cultural difference in there. And so the cure to this is my biggest advice for handling multicultural environments is replacing judgment with curiosity. Instead of taking it personally, right? Oh, Réka is rude, or Dasha is rude. It's like, okay, and then being curious and approaching it as the learner, right? And letting people be. If the person is indeed rude, it's the person's problem that he or she is rude. It has nothing to do with you. You need always show up at your best as the most kind, educated, professional version of yourself. And what other people are doing, you can't control it. You can only control yourself.
That's so true. Yes. And I would also add to clarify a lot of things and give it time,
For
because
sure.
sometimes you need to have some time to get to know the other person or the other person's
I love
style.
it. Yeah.
I used to work with the person not really closely, but we had oftentimes projects together. We worked with the same client, and she had this style of ordering, like the style of sounding like ordering you to do things when it was her request, actually. But
Yes.
because of the cultural differences, it took time for me to understand that she has no problem with me. She's always like this. Yes, so it takes time to get to know the other person. Since we are at the advice giving stage, I would recommend a good book called The Culture Map if you work in a multicultural place or if you intend to work at a multicultural place. And I would really love if corporates would have part of the onboarding program about cultures, but you can do it by yourself, to research at least the country you are moving to or the company you will work with. But I know, Dasha, you are doing some cultural training sometimes. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the greatest passion of mine and my team. And we realized there is a need for cultural training because we have so many nationalities, right, in so many offices. And so what we used, the book that you recommended is a great book. We also used Hofstede dimensions of culture. So those are 5 dimensions, and it's really, really to understand, really easy to understand cultural differences based on those dimensions. Basically, there are 5 dimensions for Hofstede. It's uncertainty avoidance, power distance, individualism versus collectivism, femininity versus masculinity, and the last one I always forget. So it's long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. And so what we did, we collected data about each and every nationality to whom we presented. And we showed those differences on the slide, right? So for example, short distance versus long distance. It has everything to do with the hierarchy. right? If the country is leaning towards vertical hierarchy, so there is more important person and then less important person, or if it's actually horizontal hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like they believe that everyone is equal, and there is no one more important than someone else. And so when our people saw those differences, they were amazed. They were like, okay, now it makes sense that naturally we are different, right? And naturally there are cultural predispositions. And then what we added there and what we worked on with our people is the element of curiosity. So that's exactly what we said earlier, replace judgment with curiosity. Because that's the thing, that's what makes our world so beautiful, the fact that we're all unique, right? We're coming from different cultures and we need to appreciate each other differences, because when we come together, those differences are actually bringing lots of benefits. And
I
we
love
are
it.
learning.
I love that you brought awareness and that you brought such a hands-on experience for them, for the participants. It sounds great. I would be so happy if the most of the workplaces would provide this, or at least something like this. Because when we go to work in multicultural or multilingual workplaces, oftentimes we are so focused on getting to learn the systems or the actual day-to-day tasks, we don't focus on these things. And then maybe you will get in a tricky situation. And one of my favorite examples is emailing. So different
Oh
cultures,
yeah,
they just ping you on the internal chat. We used WebEx, but there are many like Teams, whatever, and they just pose you the question there, and they will take it as a fixed answer. And in some cultures, you need to write an official sounding email to make it like,
yes.
a real
And your boss
information.
in copy.
Yeah, oh, that's another thing. Yeah. Do you copy the boss or do you not? Because in certain
Ah,
places, certain cultures, if you don't copy the boss, it looks like you try to go around them and it's disrespectful. And in certain
true.
places, if you copy the boss in the email flow with someone else, it's like
It's
you
an
are telling
escalation.
on them. It's an
Yes.
escalation. Like, did you
Yeah,
see
yeah,
what
yeah.
they answer? So,
Yeah,
and you don't think of this until you get to a point that you are maybe in trouble or you're in a tricky situation. So when you go to your, I don't know, team or your buddy the next time, maybe try to inquire about these small things. How do you communicate with each other in your
for
culture?
sure.
Yeah.
What is the escalation? What is the etiquette when it comes to email communication and verbal communication,
Mhm.
right? What is the escalation metrics? What do we consider escalation? It's like, okay, you need to involve higher up if this happens. You don't need to involve higher up if da 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 da. So like, certain standards so that people can rely on them to understand what are the basics of the culture of communication in a given company.
Yeah. What was the effect of the training in your case?
They started chatting and being curious about each other, and uh, we did a lunch, after the training. So everyone was approaching each other. It was like mix and mingle. And it was absolutely amazing because people started getting more curious and more patient and more open to the differences, to cultural differences. So it's really hard to measure, like, in numbers, the effects from such training, but the feedback from the stakeholders was just amazing. And so we kept on rolling that cultural training onto different offices and different locations.
That sounds amazing.
It
What
was
is
really, really needed because sometimes you see it's in many companies, it's all about the numbers, and it's really hard to understand the need for soft skills, the need for self-care, the need for education about the culture,
Mhm.
right? About time management and stuff like that. And companies who recognize this need, who understand that the more effectively the teams are working within each other, the more effectively the situations are getting solved for business,
Mhm.
right? So it's the whole different world, like to recognize this need for cultural awareness. But I am so much with you. I think that the basic cultural awareness training should definitely be a part of every onboarding.
Yeah, it's one of my soft spots. One of the projects I would love to do one day to help companies with that. Yeah, it's interesting that you brought in time management and self-care. So there are cultures where the work ethics mean different things than in the others. So for example, in certain cultures, if you don't take overtime, you don't even work properly. And in certain
Exactly, yes.
cultures, if you stay longer, basically you are looked at as incapable because you couldn't finish your
Yes.
work during the workday. So it's important to focus on this. And I also worked in like a multicultural team. So our team was Hungarians, Romanians, and Turkish people together. That was the close team. And our manager, my first manager was from Belgium, and the second manager was from Turkey. And it was so interesting to see how other team members were approaching certain topics, and in the team meetings how we were approaching certain big questions, and how the managers handled certain queries. What was the level of independency they expected, and what was their level of involvement they asked for. And it's just two European cultures. And then when we go outside of Europe and we bring in Asian cultures or cultures from America, it will be a whole new world.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I think the cure to that is setting the expectations and have company standards, right? When it comes to communication, have company values. So this ecosystem, right, of like, what is the company and what the communication should look like, what the collaboration should look like, what verbal and email communication should look like, and stuff like that. So it's all about like, educating every person in the company. What is the company like? If you will think of a company as the person, what
Mhm.
that person would be, and so everyone needs to be aligned on that identity, on that person.
Yeah, I agree. It would be also helpful to have these guidelines given to the new joiners, from the company perspective, what is an escalation?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is something that we're working on right now,
Mhm.
right? Because sometimes between the departments, it's not only the cultural thing, right? There are much more, there are many more factors in there. And so we're working on preparing the training on what is escalation, when you need to escalate, how you need to escalate, what is the time frame, who is the higher up, what is the organizational structure, and stuff like that, right? Because if we will not educate people on that, then everyone will start assuming based on their previous experiences and
Mhm.
then based on their culture,
Mhm.
right? Or based on their previous employers. So basically based on their previous experiences.
Yes. Yes, their own patterns.
That's how it works.
Yeah. I love that you bring awareness. We are slowly getting towards the end of our time, but there is one more thing I wanted to ask you. What do you think is the trickiest part of managing everyday work in a multicultural workplace?
The trickiest, the differences, creating the environment of psychological safety for everyone, because
Oh.
psychological safety is very different for everyone, right? People are different when it comes to culture, and then add personalities in there, experiences, and many other factors. So as a leader, you need to be really, really open-minded, and you shouldn't be jumping into conclusions, and you need to be aware of subconscious bias, unconscious bias, right? Because we have our cultural things too as leaders. And so we need to put it aside and be a global person, when it comes to leading a multinational, multilingual team. We need to be empathetic and understand that there are differences, and it's okay, and it's actually great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. will make things more colorful, more innovative, more productive.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. It's all about being unique. It's about like, diversity. And the biggest talent, the biggest benefit is when we are putting diverse teams together. And it's been proven by multiple researches and statistics, right? That the greatest results are produced by the diverse teams because they are approaching the situation from so different angles with so many different opinions. And then once they reach this, let's call it consensus, or like, once they produce the product, it is really well thought of.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it will fit better into the life of the workplace. Yeah.
Absolutely, because the approach is like, so diverse, and it's so um not even customized, it's so well thought of as per our differences.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dasha. It was really lovely to talk to you again. I will link Dasha's connections down in the episode notes and a little bit more information about her. You can also find my contact info down in the episode notes. And I hope to talk to you soon. Take care.
Alrighty, thank you for having me. Okay, bye bye
Bye
everyone.
bye.